That's right. You're all back again here at the Walter Bosley Channel. The machine says, I am live. Live indeed. Just a couple of minutes late. How are you this evening, this afternoon, wherever you're at? And I'm excited about this week's episode. I think we're presenting yet another really great episode of the channel, and also of the special series Killifornia, as presented by our good friend Todd Wood. And this is going to be a very, very interesting discussion today. Before we get to that, I want to welcome all the new subscribers. We have a bunch of new subscribers. We're skyrocketing above 5,000. And if you recall, a month ago, we didn't have 5,000. So I want to thank all of you who've checked out the channel and who have subscribed. And welcome. I think you're going to like being here. I think you're going to stay. And today's episode is yet another reason why. So thank you all the new subscribers. And I look forward to seeing more additional names in the live chat. So there we go. Now, another exciting announcement that I want to make is that Lost Continent Library books, my label, my brand, and Corvos, my nonfiction brand, all the books I publish are making their way onto Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. Yes, I've gone ahead and made the leap because I took another look at it, and the deal is better than it was for a long time. So I want to get those books out there to, a bigger audience, to more readers. And finally, it's kind of a fair distribution. So I'm looking forward to this. I'm honestly excited. Right now there are 7 of my titles loaded. There are 5 more waiting. But you can find Empire of the Wheel 1, and you can find all but one of the Secret Missions books, and this includes the Esoteric Napoleon. Only the Burton book, we're waiting for that to get the final load up onto Amazon, and also the Edgar Rice Burroughs reprint edition that I did, Tales of the Hollow Earth. That's up at BarnesandNoble.com as well as on Amazon. So now, and we're talking printed books, folks. We're not talking Kindle, not digital, printed. They are still printed on demand, but you can now, folks can now go to Amazon.com. So go to Amazon.com and type in Walter Bosley, or type in, if you happen to know the title of the specific book, put that in. And it's like I said, there are 7 titles on there now, and more to follow, and even more beyond the 5 that are waiting. So I'm real excited about that. And remember, go to lostcontinentlibrary.com to get to those. In fact, that's the favor I ask of you. All of these that you can get on Amazon and Barnes & Noble are linked at lostcontinentlibrary.com. I'll say it again, lostcontinentlibrary.com. There's the name right there to the left side of the screen of me that you're looking at. That's the name of the company. And all the Amazon and Barnes & Noble links are there. So please go to the website. That's what I ask. Go to the website if you're looking for the books at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. So there we go. There's that. Now, on another announcement, the radio show. I did my first episode of the radio show. Now, let me remind you, folks, the radio show is not a Walter Bosley Channel production, okay? I was invited to do a weekly radio show, which is Tuesday nights from 9 p.m. to midnight. Gosh, 9 p.m. to midnight. Isn't that weird how when we say 9, we often go to 11? That's a discussion in itself. And let me take a look here. So, okay, good. You guys can hear me. That's good. Anyway, back to it's the International Broadcast Network, IBN 24/7. The links are all over the place. I've linked it here, I think, in the community tab. The link is at lostcontinentlibrary.com. But it's Tuesday nights, 9 to midnight. And remember, folks, it's not a Walter Bosley Channel exclusive production. And it's archived. So if it's not a good hour for wherever you're at to listen live, it's not a video thing. It's pure classic talk radio. And you can't listen live. It's archived. You can go back and hear the episode. Now, the first episode that I did, that was an introduction to people who may not know who I am, which there's a lot of them out there. There's more people out there that don't know who I am than do. So I talked about a lot of things that I think I cover in Confessions of a Spooky Mind, but also some additional stuff. Now, this coming Tuesday night, I'm going to be a little more focused because the name of the show is Lost Horizons with Walter Bosley, okay? And it focuses on my work as a researcher, investigator into strange history, occult matters, and some travel thrown in there. So Lost Horizons is the name of my radio show. Very excited to be invited to be on the network, and I'm really looking forward each week to doing that show. And also, our friend Malia is doing a show on Thursday nights from 9 to midnight. Grim Scene Investigations, and hers is fantastic also. She's already got a couple of episodes up, and her third one's coming up Thursday. So, I think we've got it covered. Remember, always go to lostcontinentlibrary.com. There's going to be more and more blog posts there. There's increasingly more at lostcontinentlibrary.com, but you can find the links to all the books at Amazon and barnesandnoble.com, at lostcontinentlibrary.com. So please patronize the website. Malia has done just great work on bringing that up to speed, and we really want people to visit there and see all the features that are there. So don't forget that. So, without further ado, we're going to start this week's episode, this discussion, and I got to tell you, I'm excited about these Killifornia episodes with Todd, because the conversations he and I have every week about this stuff are just astonishing. And he's been telling me about this research, my gosh, I think a year and a half, maybe longer, on specifically this. And I have to apologize. Todd does music as well. And he has a musical theme for these episodes worked up. And this week I overlooked getting it ready. So in the future, there's going to be some cool, eerie, snazzy music to go with this series. Remember, this Killifornia series is monthly. Every month we have Todd on the first Sunday of every month, okay, to tell us about his Killifornia research. So I'm going to go into the studio and bring our friend Todd into the mix. So Todd, can you hear me?
Yep. I can hear you.
Okay. Well, welcome back.
Glad to be back. I'm very honored to be on the Walter Bosley Channel.
Oh, hey, you and me both. So Todd's known me long enough to roll his eyes on that one. So, but anyway, Todd, You know, in reading, I want to recommend a book that Todd recommended to me, The Family by Ed Sanders, and he'll be referring to. We'll both be referring to this book. Mostly he will, because Todd's the guy that really knows this info that he's been digging into and what it ties to very well. But The Family by Ed Sanders, I've read a lot of the Charles Manson literature, and this truly is. So far, this might be the best one. Is it considered the best one, the Ed Sanders book?
Yeah, that and Chaos by Tom O'Neill.
Mm-hmm,
But we won't be really getting too much into Chaos, not just yet, but down the road we will. But for tonight's purposes, our two main sources are The Ultimate Evil by Maury Terry, the 1999 edition, and
Great
The
book.
Family by Ed Sanders, the first edition, as well as the more modern edition.
Right. Yeah, these are, folks, if you're as fascinated by everything that is Manson and beyond, and tonight we're going to go well beyond Charles Manson, because as we know by now, any student or scholar of the Manson situation knows that Charles Manson was just part of a larger milieu, and that's really a lot of what Todd's research is about. And Todd, where are we starting? Where do you want to start?
I want to start with an addendum to last month.
Okay.
There's some things I forgot to mention, and that's my fault. The first thing is we were talking about Stanley Baker. Stanley Baker claimed he got supernatural powers, right? And there's something I forgot to mention. He claimed the ability to self-hypnotize. And he also claimed that he had blackouts during the murders. Now, those two things are very important. So, audience, Bosleyverse, remember those two things because they're going to come back later. All right. Now, that being said, we didn't really get into the second witness. The second witness to the Grand Chingon, our Yellow King, right? Everybody who's doing, following this and doing these investigations with us and research with us, the Grand Chingon is our Yellow King. Anybody who's seen True Detective Season 1 is very familiar with the idea and concept of the Yellow King. Now, the second witness claims he was visited in jail by the Grand Chingon and that he was congratulated for dispatching a victim, right? And not only that, he also claims that he was given war reds. Now, war reds is sort of a slang name for Seconal. Seconal is what we call a hypno-narcotic, right? So during the MKUltra stuff, if they couldn't induce a trance naturally, they may use narcotics, right? So those are very important things I'm going to ask the Bosleyverse to remember, because that implies that this Grand Chingon had influence. He could go into a jail, right? And no one would look cross-eyed at him, right?
And think about that. I mean, that's just that. The obvious implication is this person had sway in the justice system, or more specifically, among the officers of the court, so to speak. Because
right.
At least if we're talking California jails, we're talking about county sheriff's departments, who are usually those who are providing the personnel, I think, and much of the oversight for jails. So law enforcement, this is a person who, had clout and clearance with law enforcement.
Right. And this guy, he wasn't, remember, the majority of these cults were recruited off college campuses. They're young, right? The word Chingon literally means awesome, right? Intelligent, right? And it could also mean hard-headed or intimidating. So this person wasn't considered to be a square. This prominent doctor or businessman was not considered a square. So that has to tell you something too, because the majority of the people in the jail or in government during the 1960s would, I'm guessing a college student would have considered him to be kind of square and uptight.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this person had to have influence. This brings us to Charles Manson. Now, according to Ed Sanders in the family, 5 different times his followers referred to Charles Manson as the Grand Chingon. Only problem is, during these ritual sacrifices that had started in 1967 in the mountains of Santa Cruz, Manson was incarcerated, right? And if you go back to, anybody who looks into Ed Sanders, the family, the first edition, the Grand Chingon is referred to as a large man. He's described as big as me probably. And so, soaking wet, Charles Manson was like, 120 pounds, 130 pounds? It wasn't Manson. Manson was not the Grand Chingon.
No.
But, so what does this tell us? This tells us that, 1, Manson had contact with the legitimate Grand Chingon, and 2, Manson has a sort of history of sort of stealing ideas, taking ideas from other cults that he likes. If you had, he would claim something was his own, even though it wasn't his own, right?
Right.
Right.
Well, there was the case of, his envy, and I know you'll get to this organization, but Fountain of the World, was that?
Yeah, the Fountain of the World. In fact, the whole concept of Helter Skelter was taken from the Fountain of the World. The Fountain of the World cult was formed in 1948, and it ended due to the leader being murdered.
In a spectacular fashion, I might add.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in a spectacular fashion, and in a suicide bombing. Basically, what happened is, maybe I should go back and give more information about.
Tell us about Krishna Venta.
Is.
Yeah.
Well, Krishna Venta, that's not his real name. His real name was. Hold on one second. Francis. This is the name I always get wrong.
I think I just called him Krishna Venta, which meant he was a prophet of large coffee from Starbucks. So I know I got the name wrong.
Yeah, Krishna. I can't do the name right, but Francis Pinovic was his real name, and he served in the military.
What a surprise!
He didn't go to war during World War II. He was just in the army.
What a surprise that he was military connected. Proceed. Right.
Well, okay. So this guy, Krishna Venta, we'll call him Krishna Venta because I like Starbucks. He claimed that he came from a planet called Neophrates, and Neophrates used to occupy the same orbit as Earth.
Excellent.
But sadly, this orbit would take them closer and closer to the sun until the planet was inhabitable. So what happened is his people, like Noah and his arks, had to create these huge mile-long spaceships or rockets, not UFOs, rockets.
Could they, excuse me, but could Oumuamua be a relic from Neophrates?
I don't know. I don't think so. Probably not.
Something tells me not.
No.
Anyway, go ahead.
Anyway, so they had to come to this little old planet called Planet Earth. And so they came to Planet Earth, and he is the survivor of his race, just like Superman, just like Clark from Krypton. And that's basically the mythology of their cults. Now, they were located in the Simi Valley in California. I think Box Canyon, or Box Canyon may have been where the assassination took place. But either way,
I was just going to say there are multiple box canyons, place name box canyons in areas of Southern California. We have one in Riverside, actually. So
I see. But anyways, so he basically Manson ripped Helter Skelter off from the Fountains of the World cult. Helter Skelter being that there would be a race war, right? And one race would rise up against the other race. And the race that rises up has the help of the Russians, right? So this, a select few from the race that's, being fought goes into hiding in like caves or, and they come out when it's safe or when the conflict is over. And then they conquer and they take back the world, right? And they are the rightful rulers, right? Of the world.
Right. And here's an interesting little tidbit also that Manson took from Fountain of the World. He talked about the Devil's Hole out in the desert. And he talked about during Helter Skelter, he and the family would hide out in this subterranean sanctuary until the big Helter Skelter war was over, which they would help stir up. And our friend Krishna Venti, whatever his name is, he was killed. He was murdered in the subterranean passage system, the tunnels
by his own members.
By his own members in Mt Shasta, folks. This is where the UFO lore of California comes in also.
Right. So in 1958, two of Krishna Vente's members were ticked off because Krishna Vente was misappropriating funds, as well as sleeping with the dude's wives, right? You have Peter Duma, Kananoff, and you have Ralph Mueller. It's funny how that Mueller name pops up a bunch of times in this research. But you have those two. And they're the ones who supposedly did a suicide bombing and took out Krishna Venta. Now, there were like between 7 and 9 bystanders that were injured in the bombing.
Right.
Including like a little girl, which is absolutely tragic. But yeah, and the way that authorities figured out that it was probably Kamenoff and Mueller is that they found these audio recordings about how they swore that they were going to bring Krishna Vente to justice, right?
Yeah, in this, what's interesting is Krishna Venta had a connection. He had been in the military, right? Was there any military connection for the individuals who killed him?
That I'm not really sure of. I'll have to go back and look into that, and I'll give an update next time.
Because the obvious question is, were these guys assigned to take him out?
That is an interesting theory. It would not surprise me. This is about the same time they probably would have been looking into L. Ron Hubbard, right? And they would,
Well, I think they owned L. Ron Hubbard. I'm in that camp that still suspects that Hubbard was working on behalf of the behest of naval intelligence when he introduced himself to Parsons.
That makes a lot more sense. That makes a lot of sense to me.
And here's the thing. Do you happen to know how long Krishna Venta had been operating, doing his thing
10 years.
in and around Mt Shasta before he died?
10 years.
10 years. So, we have to wonder. Let's jump. Let's look at what Joseph Farrell points out about the McCarthy hearings. Joseph McCarthy was not really they didn't really go after him rabidly. Well, quite frankly, because he wasn't wrong about what he was saying. They didn't go after him rabidly until what? Until he ventured too close to military, specifically U.S. Army secrets, and, as pointed out, what's called the UFO file. Okay,
Right.
so here we have Krishna Venta, who's operating for however many years, and he'd been in the U.S. military, and within a decade of him poking around Mount Shasta, and after he's starting to operate and function and poke around the tunnels, the alleged tunnels and caverns up there, then he's taken out. So I wonder, did he stumble into something that, we could tolerate you being a cult guy, sleeping with all your, your buddies' wives and stuff like that, but now you've stumbled into something we don't want people knowing about. Now, you throw in there the possibility that Krishna Venta himself was some type of source for the military, particularly for the MKUltra and William Joseph Bryan milieu and things like that. And you got to wonder, okay, was he even a bigger threat because of what he knew about that?
Right. Well, it's interesting, the whole UFO thing that you brought that up because, after Krishna Venta passed away or died, his followers, one follower in particular named Sister Thredda, otherwise known as Dorothy Martin or Dorothy Leon, went on to become the guru for the Seekers cult, based out of Michigan, right? That the original, the earliest UFO cult in this country, right?
And don't they have a connection to the 4P, the process?
I believe they do. I believe we're going to be getting into that a little bit down the road. But it's interesting, L. Ron, it's the whole L. Ron Hubbard thing's very interesting because the process is basically a splinter group of Scientology. And the 4P is a splinter group of the process.
Well, I wonder if Scientology started out as not just a narcissistic ego boondoggle for Hubbard, but if he had kind of a deal that he'd be tolerated and they would look away if he provided Epstein type services to those in power.
That would not surprise me one bit.
Yeah. Did we say that? Did we specify how Krishna Venta, folks, was blown up in the subterranean tunnels there in Mt Shasta by dynamite?
Suicide bombing.
Yeah, it was suicide bombing by dynamite. They were literally blown to pieces. Think about it. Remember what we were being told they were trying to do to Osama bin Laden over there in the tunnels in Bora Bora. Well, Krishna Venta, whoever they were, succeeded in that particular case.
Well, that's true. Also, I should bring up that Manson studied Scientology when he was incarcerated at Terminal Island. I mean, he was studying that stuff. Big time.
That's no surprise at all because, consider the mind control aspect, the controlling aspect of Scientology.
Well, Terminal Island was one of those prisons that they were doing MKUltra projects and experimentation at.
Sure.
So and then so we mentioned Sister Thredda, and we should also mention that speaking of MKUltra, mind control, and cults, three other members of the Fountain of the World cult went on to die in the jungles of South America as part of the People's Temple and the Jim Jones cult. They drank the Flavor Aid, right?
Now, are we sure they're dead, or were we told they were dead?
We were told they were dead, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, how many?
Makes you wonder.
900 people, right?
Yeah.
Man.
It would have been very easy to lose 3 operatives in that mix, in that body count, and
That's
have
true.
them go on
That's true.
under.
But one of the people who supposedly died in the jungles of South America, via Kool-Aid, was a woman named Uma Winfrey. Can you believe that name, Uma Winfrey? She actually got injured during the suicide bombing at the Fountains of the World. She was the cook for the cult.
So this woman Uma Winfrey was the cook for the Fountains of the World cult in 1948, right? Or no, 58, and back in 1958 she gets injured in the bombing.
Yeah.
And she ends up down in Guyana, right? Or no?
Jonestown, yeah.
Jonestown, yeah.
Guyana.
And does she die there again? That's what you just said, right?
Kool-Aid, or at least maybe she was forced to drink the Kool-Aid.
No, it sounds like she'd been drinking the Kool-Aid for a long time, even before Jonestown.
Well, with a name like Uma Winfrey, I kind of expect a little bit more.
Yeah, are we sure she's dead or died there? That's the other thing. Has anyone ever looked at that to confirm that of those 900 we're told that died, the ones that might have had a spooky background, so to speak?
It wouldn't surprise me if they were infiltrated by CIA,
right?
Or other groups. But I believe there's audio recordings, just like the Fountain of the World thing. But there's actually audio recordings of like people dying, and it's pretty gruesome.
Yeah, it is. It's in fact, from what I understand, it's one of those things where is it one of those things where there are reenacted, dramatized recordings of the actual recordings, or am I thinking?
Yeah, I think there is. Yeah.
Now, also, I can't remember who it is, but one or two conspiracy researchers, I think, have pointed out that the murder of Congressman Ryan, who had gone down there to investigate, that whole Jim Jones thing, it might have been that he was going to uncover some type of deep state intelligence community operation within Jonestown, and that's really why he might have been killed. Right.
That would. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised one bit. I know I say that a lot, but with this research,
well, that's the ongoing thing. You wouldn't be surprised after a while, But now, William Joseph Bryan, did he have any connection to Krishna Venta or Mt Shasta or Fountain of the World that is known?
I don't know for sure. It wouldn't, I haven't seen anything in my research to suggest that.
What about Krishna Venta's military service? Was it U.S. Army? What do we know about that?
It was U.S. Army.
What particular command was he under? Do you know?
I don't think he was very high up at all.
Well, I mean command.
Committed.
I mean division, like command, meaning there's air combat command. There's aerospace. There's medicine command. Do you know which the psychiatry element would be under medicine, like it is in the Air Force? Aerospace medicine is where you find aerospace Air Force psychiatry, which is where you find MKUltra in the Air Force. But do we know much about Krishna Venta's service in the Army?
I don't. I'm sorry.
In the sources you've read, it hasn't specified it.
It wasn't specified.
Now, that is an answer in itself, because usually when someone's military service is discussed, particularly the World War II generation, and in particular, if for whatever reason they didn't see combat, usually, most often, they state what the person did in the branch as a means of, okay, well, that's why they weren't in the war theaters, because they were this kind of person, or they were that, this kind of specialist, or that kind of technical, blah, 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 so forth. I find it interesting that in your sources, they didn't specify what he did. Now, that might imply a connection to Army intelligence activities.
Yeah, I could see that.
So, and let's not forget that he went into the military, you said, in 1948?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he goes in shortly after.
He started the cult.
He started the. Oh, that's right. He's in the military during World War II.
Yeah.
Do we know that he was? That's what I meant to say. Do we know he got out of the military by 1948? Was he known to be out of the military?
I believe he was. I mean, he was committed for a bit.
Committed to an institution, right?
Island. Yeah, institution.
During the war.
Yeah, or after the war, probably like right. 46, 45.
Wow. Do we know where that institution is?
I'll have to go back and look.
Yeah, I'm probably throwing a bunch of questions you weren't prepared for on Krishna Venta, because he was just going to be a mention. But boy, this guy is. And folks, this is just one of the episodes of the Killifornia series. Anything that comes up in our discussions here live is just more threads to pull for Todd's research. So it's all good. It's kind of like when you're watching these episodes with Todd and I discussing this. There's an element of what it's like to be in our phone conversations when Todd's telling me about all the research he's done, and he throws it past me, and I throw questions back, and this is the nature of this beast. Is for every question you might have an answer for, you have 5 more questions, and that's kind of the lure of this type of research, is the fact that the questions keep arising. That's what's exciting about it. So
to take it back to Manson, and what we were saying is he stole a lot from other people.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, he did. Oh,
and
boy.
So there was an incident that happened on Waller Street, right? And there's this chapter in the family they call the Forbidden Chapter, because the Process Church decided to sue Ed Sanders, even though it wasn't the original source of the story, over this Forbidden Chapter. Chapter 14 is the Forbidden Chapter, if anybody is interested. So what happens in this chapter is Ed Sanders relays this story that he heard that was actually first printed in the Berkeley Tribune. And notice the Process Church did not sue the Berkeley Tribune. So basically what happened is, because there was rumblings that Manson was involved with a death cult. And this death cult's name is the most undeath cult naming that you've ever heard, called the Companions of Life, right? And they were located on Waller Street in something called the Devil House. That was sort of a crash pad started up by the Diggers, sort of another hippie group. So basically what happened is the story that was relayed to Ed Sanders by a guy named a guy named Blaine. And so Blaine served time in prison. And I'm sorry, I forget which one. I'm just getting off of work and my energy levels are going down. About Manson's ex-lover in prison. Blaine served time with this guy named Richard, who was Manson's ex-lover. And Richard, basically what happened is Manson broke up with Richard, and then Manson got out, and Richard tried to kill himself later on, and basically
well, no, I mean, the guy sounded brokenhearted, like he missed Charlie. I think it was Susan Atkins or Squeaky Fromm that said, Charlie is quite the kisser. So
yeah, and so Richard tried to kill himself, and then he was transferred to the American Medical Center, which is a lot of people go there. Thomas Creech spent time there. So basically, he relays this incident that happened at this house involving exorcism and this man named Father P, right? So basically, Father P accused his houseboy, a dude named Pussycat, of being possessed.
You can't make this up.
Yeah. And basically what happens is this other guy who leaves the cult, um, basically, Father P thinks he snuck back in, and when he snuck back in, he left a demon, and the demon possessed Pussycat. The demon and this other cult member's name is Sadi E, and so he has to. They're going to have an exorcism and like a trial for Pussycat for his crimes against the Haight-Ashbury. Apparently, he christened the Haight-Ashbury, and just drama. Just everyday drama for those type of people. And so they bring in Charles Manson to help out with the exorcism.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And basically, hold on one second, Walter.
No problem, because I'm loving this, folks. The fact that an exorcism is even involved in this is just more sprinkles on that donut. It shouldn't be surprising. It's not really surprising that it gets weirder and wilder the more you look into this, because usually what we're presented with is the straight true crime aspects of Charlie Manson. But as Todd's pointing out here in the greater milieu of this story, go ahead, Todd, with this exorcism thing. I'm loving it.
Right. Okay. So, they tie up Pussycat. They beat him a little. But let me talk about Father P first. Father P claims to be a PhD. This is important, guys. PhD, an MD, and a magician. He also claimed he was exiled from Cuba after the Cuban Revolution. He got ran out of North Carolina for burning down a church. Now, the interesting thing about the term Father P, this is a term that is used in a lot of cults, but also used especially in the Process Church. So the question must be asked that was this the Companions of Life just another splinter group of the Process Church, just like the Best Friends Animal Shelter, right, in Utah? So Kitty Cat, who's claimed to be possessed, they tie him up, they beat him up a little.
Pussycat. Pussycat, right?
Yeah, Pussycat.
Yeah.
No one knows the true identity of Pussycat, but we do know that Father P's name, first name at least, is Carl. It just ends up, being this big dramatic thing, and the Process Church ends up suing Ed Sanders over this chapter, right? So the question has to be asked, why? What is it about this chapter that made them sue, right?
Yeah, what upset the DeGrimstons?
Yes. And, they lost their court case in America. So they had to put a thing on the front cover saying that everything they said about the Process Church is bunk, right? But in England, where the book is published and where the process started, they won their court case. So the Process Church actually had to pay back. That's the rulings. They had to pay back Ed Sanders and the publishing company.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good news.
Right. But yeah, so you'll have to excuse me because my memory is kind of foggy right now.
Oh, you've done so much research on this that there's just where do you start with this? And that's why we're kind of just jumping in little slices, folks. Right. What happens is Todd tells me the basic slice, and we just jump in because, as you can see, we can fill nonstop. The an hour and a half is easy to fill nonstop when you're talking about this stuff. Because there's just so much to it, so many connections. So Charlie wants to. Fountain of the World is located not far from the Spawn Ranch. They have not
far at all. In fact, Charlie was visited This is another thing he stole from the Fountains of the World. The Fountains of the World would do these crucifixion rituals.
Yes. Yeah.
And so Charlie, he liked the crucifixion ritual. He liked pretending to be Jesus. So, he stole it, and he had his own crucifixion ritual at the Spawn Ranch. In fact, the Manson offered to take over the Fountains of the World cult.
Yeah, offered.
Right? But they refused him because on the grounds that Charlie's insane.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And remember, he
just like a little less insane, right?
He would send the girls over there to try to seduce their priests because they were celibate, and he wanted desperately to control them, have something on them. See, there's control file behavior right there. Now, some people could say, well, that's what criminals do and stuff, but it's interesting is, where did Charlie really learn control file type of tactics, Did he learn it from the MKUltra handlers, But he sends the girls over at their priests to seduce them, and that doesn't work, right?
Right. There's something called Operation Midnight Climax. And Operation Midnight Climax happened in San Francisco, not too far from the Devil House in Waller Street. It happened in Telegraph Hill, where certain CIA operatives were studying prostitution and studying how to get information out of people via prostitution and sex.
Yeah.
And
tell us where Telegraph Hill in San Francisco is.
I think it's right there on the bay, right? Close to the coast.
Yeah, is it one of the two Twin Peaks?
I think so. It's about 15. No, it's about 26 minutes from Waller Street.
Okay, but if we should look that up. I'm not mistaken. Telegraph Hill is one of the two Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
Okay, well, does that sound familiar, Sechery and Walter Bosley readers? Because Twin Peaks is a major conduit of telluric current.
Also, don't forget what else happened. A couple other things happened in Telegraph Hill.
Mm-hmm.
One thing having to do perhaps with the Promise software, and the other thing having to do with the Death Angels, the Zebra Killings.
See, does it surprise anyone that this stuff would be done where there's strong telluric current going through? I don't think that should be a surprise to anyone. And if anyone knows about that stuff, the U.S. military is going to, because as Dr. Richard B. Spence, Ph.D., and I point out in Empire of the Wheel, the U.S. Navy was messing with the telluric current in their technology way back before World War I. But I digress. Go ahead with what was going on with these people in San Francisco.
Well, okay, so Operation Midnight Climax, they're actually like interviewing pimps and interviewing and talking, getting information out of pimps, right? And studying pimps, right? Because they wanted to know how to handle prostitutes and how everything worked, how the criminal underworld worked. Well, I would just, bring up that, Charlie was running his girls in San Francisco during this time.
Mm-hmm.
Could Charlie have been one of the pimps, perhaps, that some of the boys at the safe house at Telegraph Hill were talking to?
I would say the circumstances indicate, a very strong possible yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so basically what happened is they ended up quote unquote exorcising the demon out of Pussycat.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that Charlie and this other member of the Companions of Life cult ended up driving Pussycat and Father P and dropping them off at Topanga Canyon.
Mm-hmm.
Topanga Canyon is where the spiral staircase is.
Well, and also in the UFO world, a well-known area of UFO sightings. In fact, that goes on to this day in Topanga Canyon.
Oh yeah. Yep. And the actual Sadi E, who broke back into the Devil House, supposedly. He ended up getting married to a woman. I should also bring up that the cult, the Father P cult, the Companions of Life cult, was male only, right? If you would get in serious trouble if you were fraternizing with a female. In fact, that's one of the charges that were brought up against Pussycat.
Oh,
it was
okay,
a boys' school. Literally.
Okay, so were they supposed to be like Templar monks, or what was it a homosexual based association?
I would imagine with a name like Pussycat, and it was sort of a homosexual Templar monk type of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, like they pretended to be Templar monks, and they were also homosexuals.
Yeah, Sir Pussycat, the knight of the yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, do we? Okay, now what again ultimately happened to Pussycat?
Well, they ended up releasing Pussycat because they did their little ritual, their exorcism ritual.
And what year was that?
That was 1968. I believe
68, and we don't know to this day who Pussycat really was.
We don't know who Pussycat is. I think Father P's name came out in the court transcripts when the process was suing Ed Sanders and all that.
There's no chance that it was de Grimston himself, right?
No, I don't think it was de Grimston, because I don't see de Grimston wasn't in Cuba. I don't think. How old would Pussycat have been at the time? He was like 20.
Oh, so he could have been.
He's young.
I mean, let's pull names out of a hat. He could have been Ted Bundy.
Right. Well, Ted Bundy was only in San Francisco at the Stanford Research Institute for about a semester. So I think it seems like this relationship was a lot long term.
Was Arliss Perry's husband too young to have been Pussycat?
Yes, Arliss Perry's husband was too young to be Pussycat.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No. It's mind blowing, because in the chapters, and even in the first edition, they don't even bring up like the Process Church. They bring up the Process Church in like the Spiral Staircase chapter, or the chapter 15. They're talking about the 4P and the other witness to the Grand Chingon, and this sort of this satanic organization, right? And how like intelligence operatives are like kind of get their tentacles into all these different new age groups, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's just astounding why they decided that this is the chapter they wanted to sue him. Other than like at one point, Father P claimed to be Jesus, God, and the devil, which would align with the Process Church belief systems about worshiping Jesus, Jehovah, Satan, and Lucifer simultaneously.
Now, what do we know about the title Chingon?
Chingon is in Mexican slang, it means awesome, intelligent. It also can mean something like hard-nosed, intimidating, steadfast, something like that.
I think we discussed briefly, how the god I talk about from ancient California times, associated with Catalina Island, Chininch. It makes me wonder, if they're not drawing from that lore, because we know this is speaking to the William Joseph Bryan element in this. If he was, which he had to have been associated with Sidney Gottlieb. Sidney Gottlieb, of course, in the MKULTRA division was the folklorist. If anyone in MKULTRA knew about Chiningachinch, it would have been Sidney Gottlieb. And so maybe the use of Chingon came from that. Go ahead.
We're going to be covering William Joseph Bryan a little bit later on.
Sure. So go ahead with where you left off.
The Grand Chingon's also known as the head devil. which is
Right.
I think is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe it's not a position of power, but maybe it's about messing with someone's head.
True, true. And you also talked about that there could have been more than one person using that title.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's highly likely.
Right. It makes sense that, at a given time, Chingon is a title that is programmed in their heads, and just whoever happens to be the available, to be the guy at the moment, just uses the title, right?
Right. Or if you're, again, we're dealing with a process church splinter group. Right. The Santa Cruz, the Grand Chingon of Santa Cruz. It's a title that would work on multiple levels. On one level, to engage with a young 20-year-old, right? Yeah. And the other level, the headless god, right?
Yes. Yeah, the headless god, which is who Chiningachinch is.
Right. Now, we just have to look at Stanley Baker. And Stanley Baker, I mean, even with, like I talked about last time, File 1004, that the occult murders that were happening in like Washington State, the stuff they were gathering on Ted Bundy, right? So I mean, and then you have to go to New York and the children, or Alabama, right? So, sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Oh, that's okay. There's so many lines and rails to follow that it's easy. I probably didn't help by jumping around because you say something that interests me or just jumps out at me, or I remember our conversations, and so I kind of bump you on another track. But we were talking about Charlie Manson and the Chingon and.
Right. I think Charlie Manson, that's something he stole. That's basically my point. Is he stole this, and he was not the Grand Chingon. Charlie wouldn't be able to walk into a jail cell.
No.
He wouldn't. I mean, maybe he'd be able to get Seconal, but he'd have to know what Seconal was, right? He knew what pot and heroin and all your mainstream drugs is, but he'd have to know what Seconal was, and he'd have to know how to use Seconal. That's two, right? He wasn't big. He wasn't a large man. He was a tiny little man.
Oh yeah, a very small guy. He was a big mouth. I think we all find the several interviews of him over the decades. I think they're fascinating to watch, but it's not fascinating in the sense of, oh, wow, what a brilliant guy, and you come away with admiration. Zero admiration. Because remember, and I always get I'm paraphrasing this quote because I get something in the quote wrong, but the gist is, you got to remember that one interview where he gets a real serious, this is serious Charlie. And when he says, you don't want me out there, you don't want me to start killing because you'd all be dead.
Yeah.
And I think that ultimately says what you need to remember about Charles Manson.
Right.
His demeanor, his body language, and that. And he was a guy that was a big, he loved to talk. He loved to be a big blowhard and build himself up. And think about it. A guy who was no more than that. And look how dangerous he was. Not just he himself personally, but what he could do to other people's minds. Now, imagine that, remember that he was merely subordinate to something more powerful than he. By far. And think how dangerous that milieu is. Well,
I mean, maybe the Grand Chingon was pulling Manson's strings. The head devil.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was. If he wasn't answering to someone during the late '60s, during those infamous years, he certainly had been influenced and placed.
Oh yeah.
Out there by someone and something more powerful.
Well, I'm and then there's Squeaky Fraun, and the interesting thing is Squeaky Fraun. had contact with the Brotherhood, and the Brotherhood is one of this sort of mythological biker game, like the elites of the bikers, right? The top-notch bikers. And so that's a group that Thomas Creech had lots of dealings with, as well as like the Gypsy Jokers. Like Manson had a lot of dealings with the Gypsy Jokers, right?
Yeah.
And then your process connection to that would be Brother Eli.
Yes.
Brother Eli, who owned his own leather shop, right?
And made the suits for Charlie and Tex. I believe those buckskin outfits were made by Eli, right?
Right.
In fact, Charlie, when he was finally arrested for the Tate LaBianca stuff, he was wearing his buckskin outfit and I believe and hiding in a kitchen cabinet.
Yeah, where a kitchen cabinet close to the spiral staircase. Right.
Yeah.
That house that was off its axis, and like the door would open up to like a 15-foot drop and all that. Also, I should mention that Squeaky Franz, one of her best friends growing up was Phil Hartman.
That's interesting. Tell us about that.
Well, I don't know much about it, but apparently they're in a situation like neighborhood wise or school wise where they get together and hang out. I mean, they were young. We're talking about like maybe 8, 9, something. But
consider what happened to Phil Hartman.
Yeah,
he had his wife had had mental health issues, and wow, anything mental health related, you can't help but wonder, what was the story there? That's something that I'd like to see you flesh out more.
Yeah, I will. I'm sure there's lots of articles on it. So yeah, I think I covered everything I needed to cover today. How are we on time?
We're good on time. In fact, we can now go into questions if you like from the live chat. You up for that?
Good. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let me get over here so that I can see them. Okay, folks, we're going to go into the question period.
Would you like
Yeah, some water, perhaps. Thank you. Since I now have a very helpful producer here. Okay, so what we're going to do is, you guys know how it works. Please, it has to be all caps the way we're doing this now, so that I can see it to know what you're asking. So again, please, all caps, your questions for Todd. Let me see. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put Phillips up so that, let me see. Wait a minute, where'd it go? Show. Oh, there it is. There it is. So the question from Philip Blair is, let me get that up where I can see it there. How far from Mount Shasta are the tunnels? I ask because Shasta is a volcano with active heat vents. Indeed it is. Do you know much about Mount Shasta geologically, Todd?
I don't, but I will say this. Sister Thredda, after Krishna Venta died, would go to Mount Shasta and make it sound like she was channeling Krishna Venta.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So,
well, tunnels throughout make sense because of the volcanic activity. If you've watched my film Hell's Bells, my silent picture from 2012, that's here at the Walter Bosley Channel, scroll down, you'll find it from a couple of years ago. The scene in the cave where the one character goes in and retrieves the treasure, that is actually filmed in a lava tube. Okay, an actual naturally formed tunnel from back when that whole area was volcanic. And it's in fact, sometimes people confuse lava tubes for some ancient man-made tunnel, because lava tubes can be very smoothly created. So let's see. We got the next question here. This is Freckle Joy, welcome, Freckle Joy. Freckle Joy asks, Krishna Venta was killed in Box Canyon. I can take you there. You can still see where it exploded.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, Box Canyon up at Mt Shasta, or am I getting places mixed up?
I think we're getting places mixed up. I think after Krishna Venta died, Sister Thoretta would go to Mt Shasta to channel and claim that she channeled Krishna Venta.
Okay. But Krishna Venta did have some activities in the tunnels on Mount Shasta, correct? Did I read that right?
I don't really remember.
I think that's in chapter 14, and I think I marked it right here. Let me get the reading glasses on, and I'll give you the answer right now. Let's see. The fountain was formed by a holy man named Krishna Venta, who died by violence. The family grooved with a violent history. Let's see. 40 pieces of dynamite. Well, maybe the stuff about Mount Shasta is before that. Okay, yeah, I might have read that wrong. But anyway, Box Canyon. Now, Box Canyon. Were you identifying that with Simi Valley or up in Northern
Simi
California?
Valley.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. We might take Freckle Joy up on that. Malia and I can go out there and see that, and maybe do a GSI episode where Krishna Venta died. Thanks for that correction there, Freckle Joy, because we could go investigate that as we've been doing some other sites for Todd. So cool. Yeah, definitely. Okay, okay. Freckle Joy says that's in Chatsworth. Okay, there we go. Any more questions for Todd? We got plenty of time for questions here, folks. Feel free to jump in. I'll tell you what really intrigues me again with all this stuff is the fact that we can't help but see MKUltra in the background of so much of this, and the cults in California. Your Killifornia research constantly, whatever you've been looking into and we've been talking about, and other researchers, Todd's not the only one, I'm not the only one, but this cult history in California is in the background of all this stuff. And Freckle Joy again with some interesting input. She says Pussycat is Bobby Beausoleil.
Oh, that's really interesting.
That's very interesting.
Bobby Beausoleil spent some time in Santa Cruz.
Yes, he did.
Right, and he was Lucifer. He was Lucifer in Lucifer Rising, the Kenneth Anger film. Right,
yeah. And so good call, Freckle Joy, because now maybe she knows this from another source, literary source, but very good input there. Because Bobby Beausoleil would have been the right age, correct?
Right, and Bobby Beausoleil is associated with like the process and the 4P as well.
Oh, there you go. I'll tell you. I think that's correct information.
Yeah.
Next we have, let me make the screen big so I can read that. Philip Blair asks, what would draw peace-seeking hippies to these creepy, ominous people and cults? Well, Philip, I you know what? Here's the thing. I can give you some input on that. I was a small kid during the summer that the Manson family, committed the Tate LaBianca murders, and in fact, I was 4 going on 5, or no, 5 going on 6, the summer of '69, and I remember pretty vividly. And I have to tell you, we had even down here in the Inland Empire. I remember in Rialto, my dad was always involved with coaching Little League, and he coached Little League teams. at a particular field in Rialto, and there were some county or city type buildings that I don't recall them being abandoned, but I think they were. And anyway, there were hippies that would hang out there every night. And you never got a good vibe off them. I remember the parents would keep an eye on their kids, and the vibe from those particular hippies hanging out was just not good. Now, aside from that, there was a lot of interest in things like black magic, right, and dark sex magic. And remember, there was because there was use of illegal drugs, there was a lot of interaction between, back then, the types of people that would deal in those drugs. So right. You have, peace-seeking hippies. They were drawn, to these darker influences. And it wasn't until the Manson family pulled their stuff with the murders that people finally began to, admit or it really came to light publicly the darker, seedier side of the hippie movement. Yeah, up till then it was love, 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 peace and flowers and all that stuff. And but it had never really been just that. There's always two sides to every coin.
Right.
So, a lot of the black magic enthusiasts, youth enthusiasts into that, it dates back to the hippie culture right. and hippie era. And then now when we look back retrospectively and see all the evidence for some type of deep state MKUltra manipulation in the hippie movement, it shouldn't surprise us at all that there were these darker things. So you really have to have a much more realistic view on the whole hippie movement back then to get an accurate grasp of what they were like. It comes down to this. Were there peace-seeking hippies? Of course there were. Of course there were. And a lot of those folks will tell you today that they felt betrayed. Their whole movement, their whole thing, their whole vibe was greatly tainted, if not ruined, by the damned Manson family in the darker ones that would do the awful stuff. They killed it. It's often said that the Manson family killed the hippie movement right during that summer of love because of what they did made people afraid of hippies.
Right. Operation Chaos. And not only that, there's that's the thing about Manson. He's just like stealing other people's ideas, right? He kind of like the polarity switched from like peace and love to all of a sudden he's claiming to be the devil, right? And just so I mean, the dude was always nuts, but something happened. A switch flipped, I think.
Right. Freckle Joy adds, Linda Kasabian just died. That's right. I heard that. That. And Megalith, as he pointed out, you saw there exactly what he's telling you is what I'm telling you too. Is not all of them were peaceniks. So here we have from Neva Moore. What is the process? Is it part of MKUltra? Todd, elaborate on that.
The Process Church was started by Robert de Grimston and Marianne McLean in the 1960s. And it ended up being sort of a splinter group off of Scientology. They kind of got kicked out of Scientology for drugs, basically. And then they came to America, and basically the Process Church, it's perfect for MKUltra because they believed in you should worship Jesus, Jehovah, Satan, and Lucifer simultaneously. So basically, you can get away with anything.
Yeah, it's well-rounded. Yeah, they got all their bases covered. You said there's four: Jesus, Jehovah, Satan, and Lucifer.
A little bit of Malachi Martin there with thinking Satan and Lucifer are two different beings. Now the interesting thing is like the overlap, right? because once you joined the process church, you had your choice. You could be on the Jesus path or the Jehovah path, the Satan path or the Lucifer path. Now, if you're on the Satan path, that doesn't mean you don't also go to Anton LaVey's Church of Satan.
Right.
Right?
Right.
There's like a huge number of overlap.
Right.
Yeah.
What has Michael Aquino have said about the process church? Anything of interest?
To go back and check my notes on that. But Michael Aquino that guy has there's some allegations against that guy for sure. Especially with his involvement in the Phoenix program, right? Mm-hmm, so it wouldn't surprise me one bit if he had contact or even some sort of relationship with the process church.
Now, what was our would-be weird film actress and former Scarlet Woman Marjorie Cameron? Was she in the Kenneth Anger films?
No, but she was married to Kenneth Anger.
Yeah, I was wondering if she had ever appeared in his films. But interesting, folks. If you don't know who we're talking about, check out the. Oh boy, I'm always forgetting the title. It's the Dennis Hopper film. Night Tide. Thank you. I've got the DVD over there in my cabinet. Check out Night Tide. Marjorie Cameron has a small role in that. And, of course, Marjorie Cameron is legendarily connected to Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard. So here we go.
Back around full circle.
Yeah. So let's see. Philip Blair with one here. Philip Blair asks, were the younger hippies an easy target for MKUltra operatives looking for people to try their manipulation experiments on? Yes, in a word. Young seekers far from home, short on money and needing help. So, elaborate on that, Todd.
Well, Stanley Baker was recruited right off a campus, college campus in Wyoming. How many others were recruited off Stanford Research Institute campus, right? Yeah. And
what... I'm thinking what would have made Animal House even funnier would be if at some point they're walking, along campus and there's one of those recruiting tables for CIA.
Right.
Because that would have been about the era that, think about it, that early 60s is the era that they would have started going after younger people, because it was by the late 60s that all this stuff really started emerging.
Right. And think about what MKUltra was. Mm-hmm. MKUltra, you were trying to create assassins, right?
Yeah.
And with the whole cult thing is perfect, because you'd have to, control. You'd want to study how a cult works, like the reinforcement of ideas, right? Mm-hmm. And like the whole religious aspect of mind control. In fact, the word assassin is from Hashashin, right?
Hashashin. Yeah, Hashashin.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the person, the would-be assassin, they would give him the drug, and he'd pass out, and then he'd in a field surrounded by women and said, you can have this if you...
It was, the model, talk about Charlie stealing from others, the model totally comes from the old man on the mountain thing, where it's exactly, you described what they would do, I think dating back to medieval times. Mm-hmm. That's how they would... they would get their devotees to train them to be assassins, and the model is totally from that. All these cults that you can tie,
and just look at what was going on with the Santa Cruz cult, the 4P, right? Or even what was going on in the Everglades with Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole. That's exactly what they said. They saw this black mass. Right, this human sacrifice, but they are also in their 3-day seminar being trained on how to kill people.
Yeah, I'll share an interesting personal story from my career, to the extent that I can. I once received training on how to recognize IEDs because I was working in war zones. Okay, and now, the training, I was told, was, as you're moving through that environment, to be able to recognize potential IEDs, right? So you can avoid them. Now, what that more than implies is it just pretty much states that you're going to be trained, to be driving down the road or walking or whatever and seeing objects and being able to discern the possibility that it's an IED, an explosive, an aimed charge, that kind of thing. But here's what's interesting. I got this training over the course of a week, like 4 days.
Sorry.
And that's okay. And I don't recall so much here's how you recognize them. What I do recall specifically was being taught how to use C4 and other items to actually construct an IED, construct a shaped charge, construct a charge, and how to direct it, in a specific way, and setting them off, exploding them. In other words, I was trained how to make IEDs, not just how to recognize them as I'm moving through an environment. So there's a little interesting tidbit for you from my own past. And going back to what you're saying about Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole, it's interesting how, they were trained to be brutal killers, right?
Yeah. Basically, that's their story, and it matches the methodology of sacrifice matches exactly what Stanley Baker and this other witness claim. The witness that was in jail for murdering a woman, who was congratulated by the Grand Chingon for murdering a woman. That's exactly the same methodology of sacrifice. The cutting out of the heart, which is Aztecian and Mayan, right? Now,
I would say very, very late into the Mayan Empire, and in specific instances, we can mostly attribute that definitely to the Aztecs, and before them, the Caribs.
Right. You got it. And so there's sort of a continuity. What I'm saying is there's a continuity here. They're not doing it like the Incans. They're not just beheading people. Right. They're not doing it like the Celtics. They're not burning people alive. They're doing it in the methodology that creates the most trauma. Right. All these followers, they're on drugs. They're witnessing this thing happen. They feel like they're connected with each other because they're witnessing this thing happen. They're taking out the heart, and each member of this cult they're eating a little bit of this heart, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's total mind control, and it's all these young people because they're the most vulnerable, right?
Yes. Those brilliant, so smart, those young ones who the rest of us are supposed to hand the reins of society over to because they're so advanced. Their wisdom is stunning. Their synapses are firing, on all cylinders. And as you get older, you're just not as sharp as they are. And then, funny how the young are the most susceptible to this kind of crap.
Right.
But, excuse me, I digress there with a little social commentary.
But yeah, I mean, the majority of this cult was about 40 of them were young people. The other 15 were your middle agers, right? Now, and let me interject there. I probably just killed like half of the interest of the younger demographic I'm going for. Oh, that's okay.
But you know what, young folks, you are welcome here, but you're gonna get the wisdom of age if you're here. So just proceed.
Okay.
Todd.
Well, those middle-aged people were, in my opinion, kind of sound like MKUltra scientists, right?
Yeah. Well, and in the defense of the younger, who's manipulating the younger? The older guys.
The older guys, yeah.
They're doing the creepy mind control manipulation. So there you go. I'll give you points, young people. Maybe there's a reason you can't trust older people.
I mean, yeah. How many of those were girls? This fat Grand Chingon probably wants a couple of sex slaves, right?
Look, again, the hippie culture was full of, and they recognized it. A bunch of middle-aged guys figured out how they could, party with girls, young girls. And it's like, yeah, baby, peace and love, that kind of thing.
Right.
So take it in a more sinister level. But let's go back to comments in the room there. Mr. X 1776, thank you. The Hashashin thing may be misconstrued. It may also come from Hassan or doing as Hassan in reference to the guy who founded the order. Yeah. We were, thank you, Mr. X. We were stumbling on the name of it, but the tradition, the source of the tradition is what we were trying to refer to. And I believe it is medieval or probably older than medieval, but I think it emerged to Western knowledge, awareness during would have been during the Crusades with the Templars, if I'm not mistaken, and other such orders.
15 to 17.
What's that? Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah. Scott Henry, Process Church, anyone? What specifically, Scott? We've been talking about that.
Oh no, I think he was just being, he was just sort of commenting on how the Process Church's hands are in anything. And
okay, I get it. And welcome, Scott.
It's like a cancer that has spread through the country, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Process Church, I think any researchers who have looked at all this stuff, from the days of when Maury Terry wrote his book. I remember when I read that book when it first came out, how scary and creepy and ominous the Process Church came across to me as I was reading that. I mean, I really, really had it was scary the way, what Maury Terry presents in that. And I think with good reason.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it doesn't take very many people to really mess some stuff up. And once you start realizing not every serial killer is connected to each other, right? And there's been serial killers since the dawn of time, right? Mm-hmm. But during this point in history, from the 1960s all the way through the 1980s, and maybe even a little into the 90s, these people have these crazy connections with each other and crazy connections to Washington and this, that, and the other, and it's jaw dropping.
Even though the direction we're going with our Lost Future series, and what we've already touched upon, particularly with the mysterious case of Margaretta Todd, the curious case of Margaretta Todd, thanks to, I'm forgetting his name. His book is right over there across the room. But the gentleman who wrote the book analyzing the Jack the Ripper murders and points out that there was some type of mind control going on, over 100 years ago in the 1880s, starting in the 1880s, 1890s. That was kind of early day MKUltra-ish type stuff. But we can definitely, in what you just said about serial killers, the ones who emerged in the 60s and forward, here's the thing. It's just one more nasty, dark, ugly thing that has been born of the U.S. government, specifically the military-industrial complex, since the end of World War II, since we've seen the ill, rotten fruits of Operation Paperclip. I'm one of those that the more I look at Paperclip, the more I think about it, the more I observe the fruits of Operation Paperclip. I became convinced that the Nazi regime understood that Germany was going to lose that war, and they decided where they needed to spread their virus next. And in true, and you can read this in the Paul Winkler book, The 1,000-Year Conspiracy, in true medieval Junkers and Prussian methodology, they befriended the United States and got us to absorb, some of their friendly scientists and such, et cetera, and that's how they sunk their talons into us, was through our military-industrial complex, of which MKUltra is a direct product because it was developed from these German scientists of the Nazi era, and from this, with all the connections, these serial killers, that you've been talking about and looking into, this is a product of MKUltra, folks. Let's not fool ourselves.
Yeah. Speaking of Nazis, too, you have to remember Marianne McLean of the Process Church claimed to be the reincarnation of Joseph Goebbels. Not to mention that Stanley Baker had, he had the swastika tattoo. The swastika pops up quite a bit. And then if you take into consideration Joseph Farrell's the Nazi International or the International Criminal Syndicate, you've got to have people who can do the dirty work.
Exactly.
Right? And I want go out and kill.
I want to clarify something here. When we talk about Stanley Baker, we are not talking about the British actor director who directed and starred in the awesome original Zulu film, which was a staple of my life, watching movies with my dad. We're not talking about that Stanley Baker. We're talking about a different guy entirely.
Stanley Dean Baker, who we're talking about.
Yeah. So, do we have any more questions in the chat? Let's go to them. Questions and comments. Here we go. We got one popping up here. Here we go. Mr. X 1776. I could be wrong, but if you delve into the rabbit hole, I believe the assassin's origins actually lay in fighting the caliphate on behalf of Persians. Okay, yeah. Yeah. And Mr. X says, see, Walter, your take on the Nazis there. That's why I find the Barney Hill hypnotherapy tape so important. It essentially proves what you say and is the pinnacle example of altering the mind. Yeah, that, Mr. X, thank you for bringing that up. Somebody was playing that recently on a podcast I was watching, or maybe a documentary. And that is a disturbing tape to listen to. And you're right. And here's what gets me. There's people in the UFO community that just don't want to hear Farrell's Nazi thing. Well, too bad, you friggin' idiots, because it's there. The evidence is there, and it's strong that this Nazi thing has its hands in everything. And the UFO. Yeah, the UFO. Right, what's that?
The octopus. It's the octopus. Its tentacles are in everything.
The what?
Prostitution, pornography, car theft, drug selling.
Yeah. Octopus of global control. Yeah. It's there. You might be weary of it, but I'm weary of the ET hypothesis because it don't begin. The ET hypothesis does not begin to explain the amount that the Nazi post-World War II Nazi international hypothesis does. Okay.
Right. And I was just going to say, like the Promise software, that all those things and the things that would come up a lot was like Area 51.
Yeah.
And then you have serial killer connections to aerospace.
Right.
Squeaky
yeah. Tell us.
Father was an aerospace engineer.
Yeah.
And then let's see, Lawrence Bittaker, one of the Toolbox Killers. I believe he was a mechanic for Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. If that's the largest aerospace company in Burbank, right? It's Lockheed.
Yeah. Well, think of the potential Navy connections to the Zodiac Killer.
Right.
Or, excuse me, one of the Zodiac Killers, because
while he was in the Philippines, George Hill Hodel was a consultant for aerospace.
Yeah,
I believe, as well as Thane Eugene Caesar, the guy who was believed to have killed RFK, right? If you believe the coroner's report and all that.
Sure.
Which I do. I think it was Thane Eugene Caesar. He also worked for Lockheed Martin Skunk Works.
Yeah, what a surprise. Well, I've been there. Been there on multiple occasions when I was doing background investigations. But any more questions or comments?
Oh, yes. We've got a bunch.
Here we go. We're still going, folks, here at the Walter Bosley Channel with Todd Wood with our monthly Killifornia report.
I just want to apologize if I seem like I'm tired or just drifting off. Before I came on here, I just worked a shift at Goodwill. And just to let you guys know what my day is like, I did 16,998 steps today.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I appreciate you mustering the energy to come on here.
Oh, yeah.
After a day like that.
I love talking about this subject. I love just having discussions. I love the stuff that Freckle Joy told me. I love that. I love learning new things.
And Malia and I can go investigate that for you, because Simi Valley's not far from here. We can go check out Box Canyon, all of that. Well, we can even drive by 10,500, whatever it is, Cielo Drive. So
I mean, I'm on Cav Def every day, guys. That's how much I love this subject. Right?
Cool. Well, we have another question from Telegraphic. Telegraphic asks, how does your research fit into O'Neill's book? Seems you add more background info that cinches the case Manson was an asset trained to be a cult member. A nested operation is the question.
Repeat the question. I'm sorry.
Basically, how does your research fit into the context of O'Neill's book? I believe that's Chaos, right?
Right. Well, yeah. Here's what I think. Right.
Mm-hmm.
The free clinic where in San Francisco where Manson took his girls, where Jolly and West had an office, a big MKUltra guy.
Yeah.
In fact, Jolly and West was on the board of the False Memory Syndrome organization, right? Remember all the satanic ritual abuse?
Yeah.
The false memory stuff? That was Jolly and West who was on heading the board of that. And Roger Smith, who's the one who was working at the clinic, and the clinic was funded by Abigail Frozier's mother.
Abigail Folger?
Folger's mother, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm tired, guys. But yeah, okay, so Chaos is interesting because I wholeheartedly believe Zodiac was part of Operation Chaos.
I could see it. I mean,
just look at the chaos that dude caused.
Oh yeah, it was all about terror. You could say that the Zodiac Killer, let's call it the operation, the Zodiac Killer operation was probably the first open terror.
Right.
Well, no, I'm sorry. The JFK assassination, I think, kicked it off. But yeah, I think the Zodiac Killer operation, that whole thing was a terror op. And again, as I say, I think there was more than one person. Richard Spence and I go into that in Empire of the Wheel. By the way, Rick Spence will be the guest next week here at the Walter Bosley Channel. To
get back to that question, though, I mean, I've read interviews with people who were like, we're in a different part of California than where things were going down, and they were afraid to send their kids to school.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And Zodiac was talking about shooting the kiddos, and stuff like that. I mean,
like I said, I was a young little kid. I was 5. I turned 6 in October of '69.
Yeah.
Oops, gave away my birthday month, but late in the year, and but I remember it. I can remember my parents, being real cautious and telling us to be cautious whenever we'd see the hippies. So it did a number on the peace and love aspect culture of the hippies, but
not just that. Just imagine who got bigger budgets: FBI, LAPD, San Francisco Police. All those departments got more money, got more grants. Talk about a perfect thing to control the public. You can demoralize the public. Chaos.
Here's an interesting little aspect, little insight in growing up back then in Southern California. My sisters and I, at a very young age, we're talking at the kindergarten level, I was in kindergarten anyway, we were identified in kindergarten or first grade. I think for me it was first grade, as what was called MGM, Mentally Gifted Minds. Yes. Believe it or not. And at that time, in fact, I had finished first grade because what happened was I was identified in this early, like the first week of second grade, And because of this, I was advanced into another second grade classroom that it was a second and third grade mix. So it was second graders who would be given third grade level education. And over the course of elementary school, the first few years of elementary school, I remember being pulled out of the classroom. The students would be pulled out of the classroom and shown like a list of words, vocabulary words, and told to read them. And depending upon how you responded, they would either shuffle you off or they would keep you for remedial stuff. And I remember they would just do that in a cursory manner with me. They would pull me out once, have me look at something, and then I would read it off, and they go, "Okay, thank you," and that would be it. And nothing else was ever explained, but we were placed in certain classrooms after being identified as one of these MGM kids, and I've wondered, was that just an overt thing that the state of California allowed the U.S. government to do? And when you think about how the U.S. aerospace industry is entrenched in the state of California, there's your military-industrial complex. When you look at, the Bobby Kennedy assassination, an operation, if there ever was one, happens in Los Angeles, and all this stuff we're talking about, I wonder also when you consider the way I was recruited into my career, if back in first grade, that wasn't part of it, being pulled into this. And was I lucky? Was I lucky in that I wasn't pulled into something, meant to use me that would have been hell-bent on my destruction? I don't know. But anyway, more questions? We got more questions. Miss T asks, is this Enki versus Enlil? Interesting question. What do you think, Todd?
Enki versus Enlil is the classic story of good versus evil.
Indeed.
I think that this is really it is good versus evil, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because look at the cult, the 4P cult. They're, according to Sanders, according to Maury Terry, the whole idea was to get to it's the worship of evil, right?
Yeah.
But what is evil is subjective. It's like what we think is immoral. What that's evil is what we believe to be immoral. Killing is immoral.
Yeah. Well, murder
right.
is immoral. There is such a thing as righteous killing. And that's where people get the commandments mixed up. You're not supposed to kill under any circumstances. Well, bullshit.
Right.
But murder, yeah.
What I was saying is like, if it is an MKUltra op, these cults, then you would want to try and flip the polarity.
Oh, sure.
What you perceived as good or what you perceived as bad, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you want to experiment with something like that. And that's the perfect environment for that. I think evil has existed since day one.
Well, thank you. Yeah, you're going where I was going. The problem we got here with this battle of good versus evil is you got to go way back because most of Western society bases their concept of good versus evil on, let's face it, the biblical various related scriptures of the Abrahamic religions, right? Particularly the three of the people of Adam, whatever people of the book, and we're told that there was this war and these beings fell. And, the Gnostics and some others would say, wait a minute, what if the ones that were demonized were merely the ones who lost a huge battle or lost a war? So naturally it's a case of let's demonize the enemy, much like England did to Napoleon and much like has been done many times throughout history. But that makes people nervous because of the centuries of conditioning as to who are the bad guys, right?
Right. Right, and to bring something back to that other question about like O'Neill and chaos and stuff like that, you have to also remember that COINTELPRO was happening.
Yes.
At the same time, and there is just no way that these New Age cults, like the Process Church, or they wouldn't. there's no way they wouldn't have been infiltrated by FBI, LAPD.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'll vouch for that. I'll stand by that statement of yours.
Ted
Absolutely.
Gunderson said he was doing it.
Yeah, so there we go. So was that other guy a couple years ago that, well, anyway, I don't want to digress into modern politics. I was thinking about a guy in Washington one day. But next question or comment, Sam R.I. asks, Walter, is there any connection to the Finders? Well, I don't know who the Finders off the top of my head
Well,
are.
they're talking about pedophilia rings.
Oh,
Finders, it was a big pedophilia case. It's like North Fox Island, right?
yes.
Yeah, I would say so, right? If think of this cult, right, as the people that you're getting to do your dirty work. So the people who are abducting the kids, those are your cult members. Your Honest Tool. Honest Tool was talking about sending kids to Matamoros, kidnapping kids and taking them to Matamoros, Mexico, where the Matamoros cult was, where Adolfo Costanzo was.
Well,
Right?
a friend of mine who lived in Belize for a while told me he had a talk with some years back when there was all that really bad, gory violence going on between the cartels in Mexico. He was talking with an associate in Belize, and the comment was, "Wow, this is just like the bloody days of the Aztec cults." And the Belizean guy said, think about it, just because the conquistadors and the church came in and stopped it. He goes, what makes you think it ever really stopped? And what you just said about what's being done to children and sending them to Matamoros, what brought to my mind was, just because Rome eventually defeated Carthage, there's no reason to think that child sacrifice to Moloch ever stopped.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think it happens. There's actually I was trying to find out when they stopped doing human sacrifice in Palo Mayombe, right?
Yeah.
And I couldn't find anything, right? I just found stuff about like the animal sacrifices, but in their religion, so like everything is sort of graded, right? With humans being like the top grade.
Right.
Right. So if you sacrifice a certain kind of animal, you'll get more power from this certain kind of animal compared to another kind of animal. But if you're an extremist and you're mentally ill and you decide, oh, I'm going to sacrifice a human because I'll get the most kind of, most power out of that.
Yeah.
Right. You're sacrificing.
Well, it's the other thing that comes to mind is when you look at the pre-Columbian and the early colonial era, with some of the Native American tribes and the cannibalism, there's some murkiness to exactly when the tribes of the Iroquois Nation actually stopped the cannibalism, because there's plenty of witnesses and evidence to say that it was going on a lot more historically recent than the advocates of those nations like to admit or want people to think. And that's a whole other thing, whole other discussion.
The cartels in Mexico, they're very much into the occult and that particular belief
system. Sure.
So, I mean, it's not outside the realm of possibility that human sacrifices are still happening today. I believe they are. And I believe they were happening in the 60s. And in the 70s, right?
Right. Well, Flying Bryan.
An example, just look at the Mark Kilroy case.
Yeah. Well, you might be able to answer this. I think we've been talking about this. Flying Bryan asks, is there any direct connection between Operation Paperclip and serial killers? Yes, it's called MKUltra.
Yeah, MKUltra
Period.
would be that, and then you'd have to take in consideration your more higher up Nazis that came in, like not just the scientists, the ones that were sort of overseas.
See, through Operation Paperclip, we got a bunch of Nazi-era German scientists and psychiatrists. Through Operation Paperclip, we got the things that that helped us found what became MKUltra, and we have. For example, through William Joseph Bryan, a direct connection between MKUltra and the serial killer milieu, and that's not the only one.
Right.
when
There's a bunch of others.
yeah, it's
Not
just
only that,
inconvenient.
oh,
I'm just going to say, I was just saying they are inconvenient but documented facts.
Well, the Phoenix program. Also, during Vietnam, the Phoenix program, their training methods, they're just copying what the Azov Nazis were doing.
Yeah. Well,
right?
Look, it's said 1,000 times. It was said recent podcasts I talk about, but it still has meaning. Okay, the 5-star Allied commander who was president of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower, he warned us about the military-industrial complex, and it wasn't just about corporations gone greedy. Okay, he was giving us a very serious warning, and he was the Allied commander. He was a devoted, dedicated U.S. military man. Okay, and even he, after he had been president for 8 years, warned us about this. And so the thing is, it's been easy to just kind of move that away and sweep it under the rug for a few decades, but it's not so easy now. And it's very inconvenient and uncomfortable.
Right.
And there's still going to be a lot of people who just aren't going to believe it. But yeah, the direct connection, Bryan, is MKUltra.
Right. I was just going to bring up the dogs, the German shepherds that were found murdered, dead with vital organs removed, skin.
Yeah.
That were found in New York as well as California and in Washington State. They were doing that for training in the Azov Nazi battalion and in the Phoenix program, I believe. Yeah,
and let's remind the folks where the Azov Nazi battalion is. It's in the Ukraine. Right. In fact, the Azov Battalion is one of those that we're supposed to be rah-rah supporting, which I will not. I refuse to. That's a boondoggle of misdirection. But
I call it Ukraine because I don't want Dr. Farrell to get mad at me.
No, the Ukraine will make him happy. Yeah, the article has to be in there, and I agree with him. Flying Bryan, to take it further, it seems like much of this is supposition. Nope. Not saying that's bad, just saying it may be something even more. Well, it is something more sinister, but it comes to us through the evidence is pointing to the direct connection. Again, this is documented stuff with all these people and these milieus. It's MKUltra, this MKUltra thing. Now remember, this is a matter of U.S. history. Okay, in 1973-74, the Church Committee of the U.S. Congress hauled the CIA onto the carpet, and they had to admit this heinous stuff they were doing. And basically, they were. It wasn't just an informative. Hey, tell us what you've been doing with this psychiatric program. No, they were in trouble for doing this crap, and it was a bad stain on the CIA. Which at that time was a product of the earlier Allen Dulles era. God, that nasty guy is a whole other conversation. But it's MKUltra. More questions. Let's see. Freckled Joy again is awesome here, and she says it's still a compound for another cult, the Mechichevek Nation or something, but they are nice, and we'll show you the Skull Rock where they had their crucifixion ceremony. Ooh, Malia and I are like noting these field trips we're going to take. Thanks, Freckled Joy. We're going to get more details from you subsequently to this. This is great. Gypsy Moon says, Pasadena was a hub. I wonder if it had anything to do with all the rituals that Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard did. Well, we can say that I would say that the stuff Parsons and Hubbard were doing is definitely an ancestor of all this stuff. What would you say, Todd?
I would say most definitely. And also I would note that I correct me if I'm wrong, maybe someone in the chat knows. Wasn't there a bunch of women who actually went missing in Pasadena, like in like the 60s and 70s?
Yes.
Just my brain isn't working right.
Yes, but sadly all I can say is that I'm just basically aware of that. That you would probably know more about that. And Malia was nodding her head, and I think that's come up in her research. So
Right.
that might be a future point we're going to bring up and flesh out some more.
Okay.
So, because there certainly is Devil's Gate Dam, where there's literally, it's where the Arroyo is and the riverbed is, and the dam there has been there for quite a while, since I think the days of Jack Parsons, where JPL is right there.
Yeah.
And there's lots of weird stuff. So, Orfeo Treschilla asks, so was Manson snagged or crafted? I think both.
Both.
He was snagged and then crafted.
He
That's how
was
they
at
do it.
Boys Town, right? I mean,
There we go with Boys Town again.
Boys Town, the Franklin scandal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, folks, see. Flying Brian says, MGM, mentally gifted monkeys. We made fun of all those people. My dad would not let me participate, thinking it was the usual public school hokum. Trying to come out by jealous mockery. And it might have been. It might have been. I know that I assumed we got out of that from under that microscope when we moved to West Virginia the second time in my life in the summer of 73, returned in 75, and by that time I was going into junior high. Rogue status. Hey, Rogue. Rogue says, I had to switch kindergarten classes as well. I think mine was behavior related, though.
Yeah, I know what that's about.
Orfeo Treschilla. See, this is why.
What now?
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. There more?
Oh yeah, I'm just trying to go through.
And she's pulling up more. I think folks are really liking this discussion. This talk.
And here's the thing, guys. It's not just Walter and myself. You guys are part of the team too. In the Bosley verse. I mean,
Yeah.
I expect y'all to be sending in some information. You know?
Freckle Joy is
Has to be a team effort. Yeah.
Freckle Joy's at the lead of the pack tonight, I'll tell you.
MVP.
Scott Henry says, found definite CIA connection to finders. Yeah. See, it's and here's the thing that really sucks about that is, we should be able to trust our institutions. But, having been an employee of multiple government institutions, folks, I assure you that what we're talking about are elements within these agencies, okay? I promise you. This is not a standard thing that when you become an agent in the FBI or a case officer in the CIA that you're briefed in on dark, nasty things and you're doing. No. These are elements within these organizations. There was one I think we glossed over. Yeah, let me go back one here. Or do you want me to do this one? Finish. Okay, yeah, Scott Henry. It continues. Taking kids to Mexico also overlays with Whitley Strieber's experience in special schools as a child. So UFO connection right there. Thank you, Scott Henry. Again, yeah.
On Dreamland.
Yeah, folks that think that, just like people think the hippie movement was all peace and love and flowers, sorry, folks, the UFO thing has more than its fair share of dark, bad stuff running through it. It's not all just the ETs are coming here to love us.
Well, here's something interesting. If I'm remembering correctly, now I saw this on Jay Dyer when he was talking about that, and I couldn't really find the source information for this.
Yeah.
But I probably just missed it. It's probably there. But it was Paul Bonacci claimed that Michael Aquino was running Operation Monarch, or the 80s version of Operation Monarch.
Yep.
And they were experimenting with all
Heard
this
that.
child abuse and sort of as child sexual abuse, and comparing it and studying it as if it were like alien or UFO alien abuse, right?
Yeah, like putting a veneer over it.
Right.
Putting a veneer over it.
A screen memory.
I wonder to what extent people have taken known, convicted child sexual abusers and identified how many of them had some type of government service, in their background to pull that thread. That's a dangerous thread to pull because just like McCarthy really wasn't in trouble until he started pulling the Army classified technology thread. When you start pulling those threads and making those connections that I just described, you're going to get powerful people not wanting you to do that publicly.
Remember, back in August, there was that big arrest in Utah, David Hamlin. That was ritual child abuse.
Yeah.
Right?
And
Mormon church.
Utah. Oh boy.
And that guy, his relative, David Levitt, outed himself as a cannibal and as abuser.
Yeah, a cannibal. Jesus.
Right. Because I guess there was no claim of cannibalism. And he went up there and said, he was like, I'm not an abuser. I'm not a cannibal, right? So
and they're like, why would you bring that? What was that one comment that we went over? Oh, Dow Jones Mueller asks, are the Russians bad guys? Oh, that's kind of off topic, but in a word, it depends. The Russians are not the Soviets. The Russians are getting a lot of bullshit propaganda thrown at them because, again, here in the States, because we have a military-industrial complex that has a boner for keeping us in wars for decades at a time because of the money that's made. So naturally, the BS gets spun up. And then, of course, unfortunately, you have a bunch of Americans who are nostalgic for the Cold War. I did my part in the Cold War, and I'm not nostalgic for it. And some of the coolest shit I did in my life was when I was, doing my part in the Cold War. But I know that I perplex, friends and family and neighbors when they look at my background and they go, how could you not agree that the Russians are demons? Because I think for my damn self, and I pull my emotions out of it. That's kind of one of them little things about me that is why I was an agent, because I could take the emotions and look objectively at things. And so to answer your question, Down Jones Mueller, it depends on the specific Russians you're talking about. But I'll throw you this: Vladimir Putin is not a bad guy. Ooh, there you go. Chew on that, folks. What's the next question? Dr. Rotwang. Oh, a fellow Metropolis fan. Dr. Rotwang asks, what about the Order of the Nine Angles? Any connections there? Now, is it indeed angles or is it angels? Somebody clarify for me. But there's the question. Are you familiar with them?
I'm not. No. It's not angels? Like, is this part of like the old Catholic Church type of stuff? Or
well, he wrote angles, so it might literally be angles. I just want some clarification so we're saying it right. I'm not familiar with the Order of the Nine Angles. Dr. Rotwang, you are invited to send me an email, and I'll forward it to Todd. Letting us know about the order.
I'm blind and angles aren't my strong suit.
Yeah. So, next, another question. Mark Steele says a greater version of the military-industrial complex called the administrative state was a progressive goal from the late 1800s on. Both the ideologists and the politicians were open, imported from German political philosophy. Why are we not surprised of the German connection? And why are we not surprised that the progressives in the the late 1800s on? You want to talk about an evil group of influential people, the progressives from the late 19th century and the early... folks, it is from the progressive socialists, also known as the Fabians in particular, from where the Nazis got the very specific idea on which gas to use during World War II. From the likes of a guy who I find to be a reprehensible human being, George Bernard Shaw. Yep, the writer, okay? Talk about a creep. And then let's see, there were other Fabian socialists, H.G. Wells among them. These were the progressives, people. Eugenics came out of American, as in United States, progressives. Eugenics, which also was something the Nazis adopted. So whenever you hear, lefties praise, being progressive, just, think of that pedigree there in history. I think that Mark Steele brings up a very good point, of the, late 19th century, early 20th century roots of these things we're talking about. And Scott Henry, again, it answers Dr. Rutwing. There's a definite connection between O9A and Azov. I have personal experience, evidence related, unfortunately. Whoa, we got to hear about that, Scott, sometime, definitely. We might have to have you on talking about that.
That sounds great.
Yeah. If there's a connection between them and the Azov Battalion, then that's very interesting. Russell Gill says the Beach Boys song "The Little Old Lady from Pasadena" was supposed to be about Charles Manson. Now that's interesting if true.
Yeah, I know that they had Manson wrote that song "Cease to Exist."
Yeah, and they changed the title.
Cease to Resist.
Yeah.
And Dennis Wilson beat Charles Manson like a redheaded stepchild one time for threatening his kids. Yeah.
Philip Blair asks, what similarities are there between the cults of California, Oregon, and Washington and the German cults of the Third Reich?
Oh, well. Ooh, this is an interesting thing. Well, if they're process connected, right? It seems like Marianne McLean was very influenced by the Nazis and socialism. I would just bring up that Baker was sporting a swastika tattoo, as that's the 4P cult. And it seems like there's a very, very socialist, national socialist thing happening.
Yeah.
Right? Again, I'd also bring up the dogs, the German shepherds. Right? They were sacrificed or found dead with vital organs removed in Washington State, in California, in New York, right? I bet if someone were to look, they'd probably find them in Florida and in New Orleans or Louisiana.
Well, and among the things that wartime and pre-wartime Nazi scientists were recorded, documented as of having done, was attempting to impregnate human females with the sperm of dogs, specifically German shepherds. There were other heinous experiments done on the German shepherds. So, is this could this be where some of that comes from? Again, but again, people don't want to hear it. Nazi schmazi.
You have the race war stuff, right?
Yeah.
From the Fountains of the World to Helter Skelter. Right? It wouldn't surprise me if some of that bled into the Process Church.
Sure.
Wouldn't surprise me one bit.
Were the Process Church folks all Caucasians?
Yes, I believe so.
See, because the Fountain had they had the one black what was his title, priest or whatever during the Manson era.
Well, let me
African American.
I'm going to say I'm not sure because you had the Death Angels and the zebra killings, and there may be process connections to that because there was certainly Thomas Creech connections, and Thomas Creech claimed to be part of the what was going on in Washington State.
Yeah.
Right, and working for the Brotherhood, right? Who's supplying cults with victims and pedophiles with children and all sorts of white militia groups with guns and stuff like that.
Sure.
So it wouldn't surprise me if there was people of color, and connected to the process church.
And all being manipulated. Remember, folks, what the controllers want to do is keep us hating each other and fighting amongst ourselves so that they can get away with their stuff. Having us hate people we shouldn't hate, but it's sleight of hand. So any more questions and comments? Telegraphic asks, Todd, are you writing this book? Where's this info in written form? Amazing work. I believe you are doing all this with the end goal of a book.
Right. I'm hoping that a lot of this stuff is going to be in the Lost Future, Volume 3.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And what I want to do is I just want to create a reference book for other researchers for the Killifornia stuff.
Right.
I want to create something where other researchers can go on and sort of look and just have it in their hands instead of going like, I love CavDef, but CavDef is really hard to, it's hard to work sometimes, and it's incomplete links that kind of go nowhere and stuff like that. I love Dave McAllen's book, Program to Kill, but I don't like the format. So I basically want to do something in the milieu of Thomas Newton's Raising Hell, where we just chronicleize occult and ritualistic murder that is connected to California. And that's what California is. All the way back from the Empire of the Will murders through Black Dahlia, all the way up to the 4P and everything that was going into California, which expands into the rest of the country because that's just the nature of the beast with the process church and what was going on historically during that period of time. But that's kind of what I want to do with Killifornia. And then the Lost Future, there's sort of this big reveal because Walter and I weren't really expecting this person to be as important as he was and robust as he was.
And I will say that you can look for this book. This allows me to make a little announcement here because it has to do with when we're going to get to Lost Future Series Volume 3. I will be coming out with, there's not just going to be Esoteric Napoleon Volume 2, folks. Here it is. There's going to be multiple volumes of the Esoteric Napoleon. And I'm going to probably be able to do 2 of those before later this year. And it's going to be later this year that Todd and I will begin the early work on, eventually bringing the Lost Future Series Volume 3 out next year.
Right. I mean, here's another example of like Killifornia, and we'll get into this in a later episode. I don't know if people are aware of the freeway killers or Patrick Kearney, the trash bag killer. But apparently Patrick Kearney wrote a letter to another crime writer named Amanda Howard claiming that she knew Oswald. Or he knew Oswald from the army. And in fact, he gave Oswald, according to his own words, a ride from Dallas to the Mexican border.
Yeah.
Right? When Oswald was going to one of the Oswalds.
Yeah, one of them.
There
were so many.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Rogue Status says, wanted to say I'm really enjoying the new format. Keep it going. Thank you, Rogue. So are we. I mean, and I've got we all have the Malia producing to thank for this because she has really come in and made this show high speed and it's just a completely different and better experience. And so, yeah, thank you, Rogue, and Malia thanks you too because it's really it's mostly her that's made this happen.
And thank all of you for coming and watching and engaging.
Yeah.
That is
absolutely
so amazing. I love having conversations about this subject.
Mark Steele asks, Michael Aquino, like the Mind Wars guy? I'm not familiar specifically.
Yeah, exactly. The same guy. And the same dude that wrote Star Wars fan fiction.
Yeah, Colonel. Yeah. Bird Colonel Michael Aquino, United States Army.
Right.
That guy.
But was it the Facilio? I can't pronounce the word.
The Presidio.
The preschool child molestation charges. The children pointed him out specifically. What
I guess what I find interesting is that those Mr. Spock eyebrows of his were still within Army regulation.
I doubt that.
I used now when I was an OSI agent, I could be outside of 3510. I could be outside of regulations, and I was sporting me some fine sideburns, a little longer than regulation allowed. It came to some cool points on the side, but that was the most I could get away with.
Well, what's funny is like before my eyes got bad, I used to watch the Preview channel. This is in the 90s, and they'd have the infomercials and the guy who was like all about the juice, the juicer, and he had eyebrows just like that.
Yeah, the Mr. Spock eyebrows.
It's the way like Magneto from the X-Men was drawn.
Yeah, that's good.
In the
That's
90s.
good. That's good. Any more questions? Max W. Lytle, welcome, Max, says, are there other places, hubs in the country where these kinds of things are happening? Todd,
Every
are there?
state in this country, if you look into it, there are cold cases in your state. Look into those cold cases, right? You will find them because it may only be 5 or 6 people in that certain splinter group of the cult, but they're there. They're in California. They're in New York. There's probably multiple chapters in each state. There's New Orleans and Shreveport, Louisiana. I mean, the Process Church and the Hand of Death were there too. Florida, there's 3 chapters in Florida. Alabama, right? I just found that picture. I won't go into that photo. I just went into that. I sent to Walter yesterday. But
Oh boy,
Alabama had the Children of Light. That was a splinter group. The Black Cross, that's another splinter group, right?
Yeah, you look for it, and you are indeed going to find it. It's not one of those things where, if you look for it, you'll find it. No, it's there to be found.
Yes.
All this stuff. So any more?
Yes. I
what's
would
the
recommend.
next?
Here's what I would do. I would go on to I'd find a free newspaper archive, and I'd start searching. Just search Process Church, and do it state by state. Do your state, okay? And you will probably find something. And remember,
that's a
they
good way.
changed their names every time they moved. They changed their names.
Sure.
The Process changed from the Process to the Foundation for the New Millennium to
it's a tactic.
Best Friends Animal Shelter.
It's a tactic.
Right.
It's a tactic. S.E. Carlson asks how much of it goes back to Crowley. Well, my input is this, Todd. Not as much as you think, and certainly not as much as the people that are paranoid and trigger on Crowley.
Did Parsons ever even meet Crowley?
I think they just corresponded.
There's Crowley and there's Thelema. Right, the religion of the will, but as far as personally Crowley, I doubt it because Parsons sort of takes in L. Ron Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard screws over Parsons.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then does Scientology, and then the Grimston and Marianne McLean joined Scientology in England. So I'd say maybe in a philosophical sense, but not a real philosophical sense, like their idea.
I'm going to say a misinterpretation of Crowley's philosophy, and certainly more that than the man himself.
Right.
I contend, Rick and I contend in Empire of the Wheel that Crowley would have been appalled at what was being done in 1915. He would not have been involved in it or support it.
Crowley actually wrote a letter to Parsons telling Parsons he didn't know about like how shady Elron looked.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Crowley was not nearly the demonic evil mastermind, rotten guy that people to this day who just love propaganda and dogma about things because it makes their lives easier, keeps everything in a nice, neat little file. That they like to say and think. Now that doesn't mean he didn't do some, icky things. Of course he did, but he wasn't what his staunchest critics.
I would say it goes more back, and that misinterpretation of the philosophy, it goes further back to like the Marquis de Sade, the "do as thy wilt" stuff.
Oh yeah. Good point.
I would look more into like the Marquis de Sade than Aleister Crowley.
There you go.
Marquis de Sade was a piece of work.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Next comment or question. Freckled Joy again. I forgot how much of this stuff I still know. I have read so many damn books and articles. I have so much it's not useless, information in my head when it comes to California hippie cult stuff. Hey, you know how it is when you live out here, and particularly if you've grown up out here or spent enough time, you hear about that stuff, you learn about it, and it is fascinating.
Right. I mean, and you are a world of knowledge, and you are an asset to this channel.
Yeah. We're going to, Malia and I are definitely going to follow up on some of those leads. So next. In
the interest of time, I'm going to skip through
3 more.
comments.
Plus I'm starving.
Yeah, just go to questions and let's just do 3 more questions. We're going to only do 3 more questions, folks. And here's the first one from Philomath360. Do we need to be cautious of using app-based hypnotherapies and binaural beats tech? Yes.
Yeah.
I would be very cautious of these apps, particularly hypnotherapy. Yeah. I would be, without being paranoid, folks. Just be cautious. Next question. Sam R.I. asks, is the WEF a Fabian socialist group? Also, thoughts on Yuval Harari. I don't know about Yuval Harari, but what is the WEF? World Economic Forum?
Yeah.
I think, you know what? I think they might have Fabian roots.
Yeah.
They might indeed. For me, anytime I've studied anything to do with the Fabians, I come away not liking them, seeing that they are one of the main sources of all socio-political evils of our times. Okay, the Fabians were not good people, folks. They are the ancestral forebears, so to speak, of the elites we're dealing with today, the Klaus Schwabs, the George Soroses, and that ilk, and Bill Gates and such. All that ilk, they're a product of the influence of the Fabian socialists. So now Yuval Harari, I don't know that name.
I don't know. The name sounds familiar. I've heard it, but nothing's coming to mind right now.
Yeah, we'll look that up and get back to you on that. So final question. From Mark Steele. Aquino was also a high priest of the Temple of Set, indeed, Egyptian mythology-based cult.
Right, and he's the right-hand man for Michael Aquino.
Yeah.
The Church of Satan. And Michael Aquino, am I wrong? Did he played the devil in Rosemary's Baby, didn't he?
Aquino? No, Anton LaVey.
No, Anton LaVey.
Yeah, you're getting, well, I don't know, I can't remember if LaVey did actually play the devil. You mean in the close-ups? Because it was only in the close-ups.
Yeah.
But I don't, that'd be interesting if he did.
Kind of goes with that one.
Okay, one final question that kind of connects to that. Mark Steele says Crowley was a spy as well. Definitely in World War I. He wanted to be more so in World War II, but I think they kind of just used him as a loose source. Working for British intelligence, yeah, that's who he would have been working for. So, so there we go. Well, folks, I think that's it. My gosh, we've gone 2 hours and 22 minutes tonight. This has been a great one. And I want to remind you that, first, let's thank Todd for being here for over 2 hours after a long day of work. Thank you, Todd. This is one of the best we've done.
Awesome. And thank you, Bosleyverse. All of you are important. All of you, you're part of this investigation. So bring on the knowledge.
The expanding Bosleyverse, because we have really, all you new subscribers, wow, thank you for responding and hit the likes on these. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. We have Malia Grimm to thank for how great the show is looking and just being able for me to have guests and stuff. This is fantastic. So between Todd and Malia and all you guys, I have all these great people just making this better. Todd, thank you, and we'll be talking in our usual tomorrow. Monday is our talk day. I screwed up and forgot, got busy this week, but I'll be talking with you tomorrow. And thank you again, and you have a good night.
Thank you. Have a great night.
And okay. Okay, so folks, I thank Todd again for spending so much time with us. And before I go tonight, I want to remind you to go to lostcontinentlibrary.com for the links to all the books now that we're at Amazon, folks. We're talking the printed books, not Kindle. We're now on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. We're on both. And increasingly, you're going to see more of the links there to get the books through LostContinentLibrary.com. So please go there and check out the whole website. I'm adding things to it. It's going to be increasingly more active with information, and there will be merchandise. And again, you can get to the books from there. Next week, next Sunday afternoon, Richard Spence, my co-author on the first Empire of the Wheel book, okay, he'll be my guest. And this is going to be fantastic. I'm really looking forward to this because we're going to talk to Rick about, the stuff, the books he's been doing and the research he's been doing since we did this book so long ago. But we wrote this together started in 2010 and finished it in 2011. And, this was quite the work, he and I put together back then. And, with the potential with the TV development, moving along really well, it's going to be, even more interesting for you guys out there. So again, I want to thank all of you, and remember, on Tuesday nights from 9 p.m. to midnight Pacific Standard Time, I am at the International Broadcast Network, IBN 24/7. And, you'll be able to go to lostcontinentlibrary.com, and it'll lead you to the link, I think, at walterbosley.com from there. And that's live, 9 p.m. to midnight PST on Tuesday nights. And then it's archived. You can hear the replay if those hours aren't conducive to your schedule. And that's my 3-hour radio show. It's different than what I do here at the Walter Bosley Channel, okay? It's a little more... it's just me. It's audio. In some ways, it's even more casual, but it's also a little more focused on certain things. The show is called Lost Horizons. That's Lost Horizons with Walter Bosley, and join me over there Tuesday nights if you can, or listen to the replay. So. I want to thank Todd again. I thank Malia, my producer, and just say good night to everybody, and I will see you next week. So thanks again.